There we go. Excellent condition, it says on the stream. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Um, there we go. Still figuring out the whole live thing. Welcome, fellow coders, to this sort of a follow-up live stream. I had previously done one on a little bit of Spring Boot backend with a React front end. So I just wanted to continue this series because I said I would. So I like to follow through on what I promise. Um, for this one, just to give you guys some backgrounds, I'm doing a to-do list application. I know it's been done before, but what I'm doing here, the shtick, if you will, here is that I'm trying to create this application in such a way that it's more or less production ready code. In other words, this is code that I would, if I was tasked with creating this as an application myself, and someone was paying me to do it, what would my code actually look like? So that's a slight difference of what I'm going for here with the code that I'm writing is let's make this, good code, as good as I more or less reasonably can make it on something like a live stream. So this is going to mean that the live stream goes longer, but it's going to mean that you're going to learn a lot about what I would actually do in the real world. Now, whenever I'm going to do something that I would not do in the real world, I typically say it. I'll say, this is not what I would do, and so on and so forth. So that's a little preamble that I wanted to give you. Also, since we're at the top of this, and this is sort of my, my own thing that I'm doing, my own company that I'm running, coderscampus.com/bootcamp. If you are interested in becoming a full-fledged employed programmer, and you're tired of just learning from things like this, these are great. Obviously, live streams are great, and learning from YouTube is great. But if you really want to have that mentorship, get sort of one-on-one support with me, and with a job guarantee, that's what this bootcamp does. So you can go to Coders Campus, coderscampus.com/bootcamp is the URL, and I will hold your hand and bring you through the entire process of teaching you how to code. Currently, the sort of deadline to apply is like tonight. So this is really last minute. I doubt anyone will actually join the boot camp, with a single day's notice. But if you're interested, if your goal is to get employed as a programmer, check it out. If you're not watching this when I go live today, and the time expires, then you can always join the waiting list for the next boot camp. I probably do one every 3 to 6 months. But yeah, it's a great experience. The goal is to get you a job at the end. I guarantee that you'll get a job offer if you graduate. How I can guarantee that is because I just continue to work with you at no extra cost. Once you get out the other end and once you graduate. I care a lot about my students. I care a lot about the people who I teach because I spend 6 months with them. I get to know you very, very well. We get to know each other very, very well, very intimately, and I do everything I can in my power to help you get a job. And yeah, students are getting jobs, so that's great. It's great to see them getting jobs and actually changing their lives for the better. That's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. So without further ado, let's get into this code. So, where did we leave off? So we left off sort of obviously here with this, checkbox. If I check it and refresh the app or whatever, it sort of saves it in the in-memory database. I say in-memory because in my repository, normally this is where the repository would contact or talk to your actual database. I'm just storing this in memory. So I just have a list of to-do items. And again, a to-do item is made up of an ID, the string of task, and whether or not that task has been completed, just a Boolean true or false. So very simplistic concept here, but in the repository, I'm just storing it as an array list. And when we first load up the application, if we don't have any to-do list items at all, or to-do items in the list, then we create one. So that was the sort of MVP, minimum viable product, step one of this program. Step two is going to be actually creating the CRUD, creating, reading, updating, deleting. CRUD, CRUD. CRUD is what we do all day, every day as programmers. We create data, update data, read data, and delete data. It sounds very simplistic because it is simplistic. That's really ultimately what we do at the end of the day is we take inputs of data, we do something with those that input of data, and then we output something with the data. And in between, we usually do any form of, or any combination or single operations of CRUD, creating, reading, updating, deleting. So that's what we need to do now. If we want to have a true to form task list, we need to be able to create new tasks. So let's do that. That's a decent starting point here. We can go and change the front end code, which is over here. Let me make this bigger. What is it? Control plus to make it bigger. There we go. For those of you who are on like mobile phones, they need to see more of the screen. All right. So where did we leave off? La 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 la. Hey, I've loaded up. It's been a while since I've looked at this code. It's been like a week. So we have our to-do list or to-do item components that we are. So yeah, app.js is sort of the root. When it comes to the root page, when it comes to React apps, they are single page applications, SPAs, which means that everything is rendered inside of one index.html file. So one index.html file gets rendered, and app.js continually just feeds different views, I guess you could say, into that one index.html page. So that's how React works. That's how a lot of single page applications work. So yeah, that's what is up. So app.js is like the root of your program. Usually you don't put a lot of functionality in here other than just sort of, telling it how to do things. It's kind of like a controller, sort of, in my opinion. If you know anything about Java and Spring MVC, it's kind of like a controller. It controls how the flow of the application goes. Usually a lot of your routing code goes in here. But for this one, all we're doing is we're adding a div, which has to-do items. So we're returning a list of, we have an array of to-do items that we're fetching from the database here. So use effect is what we use on load, which is why we have the comment saying, hey, I've loaded up. So on load, if we don't have any to-do items, we go and fetch them from the database, quote unquote database. And then we populate the view with those items, which is why we see this task number 1 here. That's the one task that we have in our database. So we go and fetch it, and then we show it by updating the to-do items state. So there's a hook here called use state. This is sort of the newer way to do manage state in React. Instead of using like this.state, you can use hooks, which I just prefer it. Looks nicer to me. So we have essentially a getter and a setter. Same concept as in the world of Java. We have getters and setters. So the getter, we get the to-do items over here. When we're returning the actual view content, we need to return it onto the screen. We're getting that list or that array, and we are iterating through it and returning a, based on the data that we have, we return a component made up of that data. So what is that component? Let's go and check and take a look. This is the to-do item component. So this is what we actually see on the screen here. This task number 1 is made up of this to-do component. So if we want to have the concept or have the ability to add new to-do items to our screen, then that's probably one level back, right? We're not getting into the individual to-do items because it's not like you click on a to-do item in order to add a new item. You want to do it at the parent level. So the parent level in this case is the app.js. So we need to add sort of like a button somewhere in this view in order to add a new to-do item. So maybe we want to keep it at the top, so we can add a new div at the top. Now this is interesting to note. What happens here is that it's complaining about the code now. One thing in React is when you're returning JSX, which is just a flavor of, it looks like HTML, but it's not actually HTML. It's a flavor of HTML. It's like a JavaScript HTML. So you must have return only one parent tag. Right now we have one div tag here and another div tag here. So that's meaning you have 2 div tags that you're trying to return on one level, and that doesn't like that. So the solutions are you could wrap everything in one div tag. So we take both of these div tags and move it up with Alt up into one div tag, and see now the parent tag is just one parent div tag, and then it's okay with that. If you don't want to make it a div, you can delete the word div and just have open or an empty tag like this. That's called a React fragment. That's how you do that too. Sorry, I've just been neglecting the chat here. Let me just see. Nice to see you again. React is what I need now. Thanks. Cool. Glad to help you. So we have the parent. So yeah, we have one tag that wraps everything, right? That's what's happening here, and that's why it is compiling linting correctly. So in this div, we want to add essentially like a button, right? We want to have a button let's just create a button that says add new, item. Save it and go back to our view. And now we have this generic button that says add new item. When I click on it, nothing happens. Now, I'm not going to go to styling. There's a bunch of different things that you can do to make this look pretty. One thing that you can do is bring in Bootstrap. A lot of people have opinions about what you should or shouldn't do. But yeah, I'm not going to bring in any major framework or libraries here to make it look nice. I'm just going to really focus on the functional code itself. Again, in something like this, a live stream, I can't get into that level of detail. Again, if you want to join my bootcamp, coderscampus.com/bootcamp. Today's the last day to apply for this upcoming cohort. Check it out, coderscampus.com/bootcamp. That's where I can go into a much deeper level of explanation into all this stuff. So, all right, add new item. So what should happen when we click on this button? Okay, what obviously should happen? Well, we want to add a new to-do list item to this, or to-do item to this array of to-do items. So how do we accomplish that? How do we accomplish the task of adding a new item? Well, we need to understand that the front end is more or less just a view. The front end, meaning what we see here, is more or less just a view of what is a representation of what is in the data structure and what's happening in terms of the database, right? So essentially our goal here is when we click the button to add a new item, we need to add a new item into our database. And again, I say database, I really mean just the server side. In the server side, we have an array list of these items. So that's our goal. Our goal is to add a new item into, or a new object into that list, and then return it back to the view. So it's going to have to, when I click on this button, it's going to have to call the backend code. So how do we call the backend code? Well, we've done this already using the fetch statement. Fetch is what we use in the world of JavaScript to make a call to our backend, to our server side. So same thing applies here. When we have a button, we can add the on click event. So we can say on click equals, and with React you can use, which I like, it's different from Angular or Vue, I think. You use the object notation here. You can pass in essentially like an object, but what we're actually passing in is a function. So what we're saying is when we click, I want you to execute a function. And the function can be whatever we like. I'm going to create a function called add new to-do item. Okay, this function doesn't exist yet, so it's underlined in red. So we need to create that function. Now, this is where I was confused at first when I was learning React. I was like, well, where do we put the functions? Is it, in this return statement? Do I just put it right here and say function, whatever, add new to-do item, and add a new function here? And then it was like highlighting this code, and I was confused. So no, we don't put functions in the return. When the return statement here, when we're creating a component, the return statement is for returning the quote-unquote code for the view. Right? In other words, the JSX, the JavaScript extensible, whatever JSX stands for, it's essentially just the HTML code. So don't put functions. We don't have functions. We don't have necessarily, we don't have logic. There's a way to do ternary operators, but it's mostly just the view, right? So we don't return functions. That's not where the function goes. Also, you might hit this problem where it's like, well, now all my code is broken. What's going on? Again, it has to be on the same line. So if I hit backspace, 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 and bring that opening round bracket up to the return statement, then the errors go away. I was wrestling with that for a while too. So the functions go above the return statement and below the scope of the actual component that we are defining. The component we have here is called app. Okay, that's our functional component. So it has to be inside the scope of the app, but above the return statement. So in other words, right about here, we can add a function and then our code works. So add to do item, let's go ahead and have it do something. So like I said, when we click on the button, we want it to do something, we want it to talk to the server. How do we talk to the server from the front end? We do a fetch. Okay, how do we fetch? We do HTTP localhost 8080. Now obviously this changes depending on the environment that you're in. Normally this is where you would extract this out into an environment variable, and you'd store it as an environment variable, and it would change depending on if you're in localhost or local or dev or production or QA or whatever. the prefix here would change. So, instead of saying localhost, if you were in QA or whatever, it would be like, QA.mytodolist.com. That would be the prefix for all your API calls here. Or if it was just in production, it would be mytodolist.com or whatever. So this can be variable. But again, I don't unfortunately have time to show you how to do that. I could if you joined the bootcamp, coderscampus.com/bootcamp. So localhost 8080, we wanted to call the backend. So how do we call the backend? What do we do? What's the process? What's the convention? The convention is the JavaScript code calls the controller. Controllers talk to services, services talk to repositories, and then all the way back. We have seen this in this little diagram here, if you can call this a diagram. From the front end, we call the Java server. In other words, we make an HTTP request from the front end, which is what we're about to do with the fetch statement, which calls a controller, which is in Java, and then the Java controller talks to a service, and then the Java service talks to a repository, and then the repository comes back and sends data back to the service, and then sends data back to the controller, and then sends data back to the front end. That is the cycle that we do from front end to back end and returning to the front end again. So we need to make an endpoint. So what is our endpoint for creating a new to-do item? Well, there's a standard way to do this. When we're creating an item, typically this is known as a post. The post will post to /API/to-do items. Okay, to-do items is pluralized because that's the way that you usually outline it. Let me give you a good breakdown of how this works. CRUD is create, read, update, and delete. Again, that's all we do as programmers all day long. We do CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. But what does this actually mean? What does this resolve into in terms of the world of Java? Well, typically, when we're creating something, we're doing an HTTP get. So we'll say, get. Creating is post. Reading is a get. Updating is a put, and deleting is a delete. These are HTTP request types. Okay, so CRUD, create, read, update, delete is post, get, put, delete. That's how they map to each other. And how do we use this on the server side? Well, this typically resolves to endpoints like http://localhost 8080/ something, some prefix. We have a prefix called API is the prefix that we use, which is kind of standard. And then we have the domain, object name, and we pluralize it. We should make sure to pluralize it. Plural. Nah, I don't want to do that. How would I? Whatever. Domain object name / that's it. So when we're posting, we just say /API/ the domain object name, and that means we are creating. Okay. Same with a get. If we're just doing a get, we can do /API/ domain object name, or how can I do this? Or / the ID of the domain object. So if you want to get all of the objects, you can do that. If you want to get just one of the objects, you do this. For putting, that means you are updating an existing element. So if we're updating an existing domain object, we have to pass in the ID because that means it already exists, right? And when we're deleting, we have to pass in the ID because we're telling it which one you want to delete. Typically, you don't say delete everything from the front end. That's usually not an option for users, but so that's how it sort of shakes out. So how does this? How can we take this as a template and use it for our ability to create a new to-do item? Well, again, it's just how do we create something? Let's go to the create, which is a post. So I have a post mapping, and then here's my URL. So if I were to paste in this URL and change it to the appropriate double quotes, the rules here are we don't have to include the actual root domain. So we don't have to say http://. So we get rid of all that. So we have API / the domain object name. What is the domain object name in this case? It's the to-do item. and then we pluralize it. We always want to add the S on it. That's just a convention that we use. So, boom, that's how we create something. So that's the, I should say, that's not how we create something. That is the mapping. That is the endpoint that we're using. So typically we want to return a response entity. And we can call this method whatever we like. We'll call it create new to-do item. And you don't have to pass in any parameters because there's no real parameters that are needed when creating something. You just say, hey, create this object. Since we know it's a new to-do item that we're creating because it's in the to-do controller, we know that we need to create a new to-do item. To-do item equals new to-do item. So this is plain old regular Java code, nothing special there. It's just the instantiation of an object. But when we are creating a new to-do item, is there anything that we need to have in place that are sort of defaults that we set? So to-do item dot set. Wait for my computer to catch up. We never set an ID. With Hibernate, we don't set an ID ourselves. We let our database do that for us. Should we have a default value for is done? I think so. By default, if you are adding a new to-do item to your to-do list, it probably is not yet done, right? You wouldn't want to create it and then automatically have it be done. That's not generally how to-do lists work. To-do item.set task, we probably want to have some sort of a default name for our to-do item, right? So I'm trying to think though. This code that I'm doing here, it feels more like a service to me. A controller code should really only, accept the request coming in, delegate the task to the service, and then return the data back to the view. So this code that I'm actually typing out is actually more like service level code because I'm starting to type in. This is business logic that I have here. Should a to-do item, a new one, be done or not done when it's created? What should the name of the to-do item be by default? This is all service level code. This is what makes this project unique to any other project that you could create on the web. So I caught myself and realized, oops, this is actually service code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delegate to the to-do service. So I'm going to have to-do service dot and create a new method called, I don't know, create to-do item. Okay. So this doesn't exist yet, but let me cut out this code. I'm going to cut, and I'm going to hover over this create to-do item method, and I'm going to say create this method. So it's just going to automatically create it with a, here we are in the to-do service now, and it creates a public void method with a stub in here, and I'm going to just paste the code that I was creating before. Cool. Now, do we have in the service, do we have an idea of how many? No, we have no concept of the IDs or anything. Do we have it in the repository? Yeah, we have the ID counter in the repository. So I see ID counter. So we probably need to also have the I want to create the what's going through my head right now is I want to create the task. I was kind of wanting to do this, task number, and then add the ID, right? The ID of this task. That sounds like it's totally possible. I can do that, but thank you, best teacher on YouTube by far. I do appreciate nice comments like that. I am also open to criticism. Okay, I try my best not to have my feelings hurt. If people have constructive criticism, by all means, but nice comments are always obviously nice. So I was trying to do this, but maybe the juice is not worth the squeeze on this, maybe, because what I would have to do is I'd have to essentially call the repository code first, and I could do this. I could call the repository code. So in other words, not set the task, and then say to do repository dot, what did I say? Save. What's the I mean, I don't have a save method yet. I'd have to create a save method, which is true. We'd have to create this method anyway. We'd have to have a save method that would return the to-do item that we're saving. So we have a save, and it would take a to-do item, and it would save it to the list. In other words, it would say to-do items, which is the list up here. I'm pointing at it on my screen. You can't see that. When I point at my screen, Trevor, I need to highlight it. So the to-do items here is an array list. So I would say to-do items.add this to-do item. That's sort of what I would want to do, but before I add it, I would need to generate an ID for it because I'm not using a database. Normally the database would do this, but I would need to do this. So I would need to say to-do item dot set ID equal to the same thing that I do up here, ID counter plus plus, which means take the existing value of the ID counter, which it was initialized at 0, and add 1 to it, and then return that value into the ID. Actually, that's not true. It gets the value of the ID first and sets it, and then it increments it afterwards. So anyway, that's a nitty gritty thing that you don't need to care about. So yeah, this is where it sets the ID, right? So this logic is handled as part of the repository, and then we would say return the to do item, and this to do item has been is mutable and it's been mutated. It's been mutated with a new ID. So when I say return to do item, this to do item now has an ID inside of it that it did not have before when we were trying to save it from the service. Because remember, in the service, we did not set the ID. Okay, we just set is done. That's all. We didn't set the ID. So okay, fine. We can say to do repo from the service here, to do repo.save, pass in the to do item, which at this point is a completely empty to do item except for the fact that the is done variable has been set to false. That's it. So it doesn't have an ID. It doesn't have a task name. As soon as we save it, it'll go into the save method. It will add an ID to it. It'll set the ID. So now this to-do item has an ID. It'll add it to the list of to-do items, and we'll return that individual to-do item back here. So this save method returns something. It returns a to-do item. So we can actually re-mutate the to-do item variable that we declared up here. We set it back to what is returned by the to-do repository. In other words, reassign now back to the to-do item I initialized here, reassign it with an ID. That's what it's going to have now as an ID. So now that I have an ID on line 42 here, I can say to-do item.set task name, essentially the name of the task, to be task number, and now I can get the ID of that to-do item. Do you see how that works? Previously, why is this complaining? Oh, I didn't save my code over here. I added it here, but I didn't save it, so it doesn't know that that method exists. So I saved my repository code, go back to the service, and now it's happy. If I had taken this line and moved it up one line, this set task here, setting the task number, this at this point is null. To-do item.getID is null. It doesn't have an ID yet. It doesn't have an ID until after the save method. The save method is what introduces and sets an ID. So now I have access to that ID, and I can say return that to-do item. Okay, in other words, I need to change this to the create to-do item should return a to-do item. Boom. Back to the controller. Again, I'm just following this structure right here. Controller calls a service calls a repository sends the data back to the service, which we just had, and the service sends the data back to the controller, which is now what we have inside of our controller here. So this create to-do item service call returns a to-do item. So we can reset that or set it into a to-do item variable like this. Cool? Great. So yeah, I can set it back in here. And now what is the purpose of a controller, right? The controller delegates to a service, right? The controller is here. This entire code that we're looking at is a controller. The controller delegates to a service, which is right here, to-do service.create to-do item. And then this, blah, 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 we get the data back. And then the next responsibility for a controller is to send the data back to the front end. So in other words, we can say return response entity.body, .ok to-do item. So what that will do is that will send that item that we created back to the front end. All right. Now there's a few little things that we can do here depending on how we want this to work. Yeah, this is okay. This makes sense. From an API standpoint, which we're creating here, this makes sense. So now we have the ability to add a new to-do item. But if we go back to our front end, if we go back to our what's happening? Oh, we haven't created that apparently in our front end. Did I not save it? Oh, I didn't save the code. So save the code. That'll get rid of that error. So when we click on add new to-do item, right now we're just doing a fetch to nothing. So now that's not good. We need to fetch to the endpoint. We just created a controller endpoint. Our controller endpoint is what? Our controller endpoint we just created is API slash to-do items. Okay, as a post. So it's a post mapping. That's important, not a get mapping. It's a post mapping for API slash to-do items. That's how we create a new item. So we do slash API slash to-do items. I think it's a capital I, right? Yeah, to-do items. And then we need to do a few things. In the fetch method, in the world of JavaScript, the fetch method takes a few parameters. The first parameter is the URL that you are calling, which we've done. The next is an object that essentially represents all the properties that need to be taken into consideration here. So we have an object that has properties. The properties of this object that we're passing in are going to be things like, what should the HTTP headers be? So we can say headers. And headers is also, it has the value of the headers is an object, which has properties. So we give it an object. The content type we need to set to be application JSON. That is what we are using here. That is what we are working with is application JSON. I had to do that up here, right? Didn't I do it up here? No, I didn't do it up here. Can I get away with not doing this? I don't think I can. I think I need to set content type to application JSON, just because you have to, because that's what I'm going to be doing. I'll show you in just a second. The next thing that we send as a part of these properties are the body of the request. So, we need to specify that this is a post method. Remember, back here, post mapping. Post mapping means it is a method equals post. Okay, so that's why we need to set method equal to post. This is HTML land that we're talking about. Method is post, and then we need to define a body of our post, or a body of our HTTP post request. So how do we set a body? A body is like this is the contents that we want to send to the server, right? And actually, what I'm saying, in this case, we don't have a body. In here, this is where the body would be. So back in the world of Java, the API to-do items post mapping endpoint, right here, there is nothing in the body. This is where you would put the body of the request. You would normally put like at request body is equal to like a to-do item object. And so this means that it would be accepting, in the body, it would be accepting a to-do item. But since when we're creating a new to-do item, there's nothing really to send. There's nothing we need to initialize it with. If we wanted to send any custom data, we could, but we actually don't need to because we're just creating a very basic object here. So normally you would also specify a body, and there's a way to do that appropriately by using something called json.stringify, and you would stringify an actual, request body object or something. Which is just a JavaScript object with all the properties that you would send as a custom object. But anyway, we actually don't need to do that because the body is actually empty, so we don't need to send anything. So I'll say that, set that to be empty. And then when we do the fetch, this will be fine. This will call the server, and it will create the to list item, and everything will be fine, and it will return it. But we're not doing anything yet with the returned value. We want to do something with a value that it returns. Remember, it's going to return our newly created object from the server side. So how do we do that? Well, same thing that we did up here with our fetch.then. Fetch returns a promise. A promise is just a fancy word of saying, I promise that at some point I'm going to return data to you. Just be patient, and I'll let you know when the data is ready. So it's kind of like you're sending a little minion out to do a task for you, and the minion will go and do the task, and then the minion will come back and then tell you when they're done, alert you when they're done, notify you when you're done. And then when they alert you that they're done, you can do something, right? So you say, go to the grocery store and get me some milk. And then they'll come back from the grocery store and ring your doorbell to let you know that they've got the milk. Well, when the ringing the doorbell to let you know that, they've got the milk is kind of like your .then. Okay, well, now they're here and they have the milk. Now what do I want to do, right? Well, now I want to take the milk and put it in the fridge. That's your .then, right? Now that they're back, we don't know how long it's going to take for them to get back. That's what a promise is. The minion goes out and does a service for you, maybe like Instacart. You order Instacart in this beautiful pandemic world that we live in. go out on get an Instacart person. They're going to ring the doorbell when they get all your groceries and stuff. You don't know how long it'll take. Could take 5 minutes. Could take 5 hours. You don't know. So that's the whole concept behind a promise. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but can I ask some questions on chatting here? I don't know the rules here. And is React actually used with Spring Boot in company? So, great question. Can you use React with Spring Boot? Yes. And is it used in the real world? Yes, I've used it myself in the real world. It doesn't have to be React with Spring Boot. It could be Vue.js in Spring Boot. It could be Angular in Spring Boot, although Angular is a bit of a beast. You don't see that too much, but it could happen. It has happened in the real world. I have created and worked on an Angular app that interfaced with Spring Boot, in other words, a Java app. Totally. Whenever you're talking enterprise level software, it tends to lean towards Java. When I say enterprise, I mean big application, millions of transactions, hundreds of thousands of users or more. That's where Java really shines. If it's a small little mom and pop shop, like a pizza place or something, Java's a little bit, it's a little bit, it's overkill. You don't need Java to do a little mom and pop shop. They're not going to be dealing with, high frequency, large volumes of transactions. So you don't need Java. Can you use Java? Yes, you absolutely can still use Java. It's just a little bit overkill. You might favor other things, Node.js. You might favor, any other server-side language. You can put in any real server-side language that has a REST API in front of it. It could be a Python server, web server. It could be a, I don't know, C#, any server-side language, mostly any server-side language. You could plug in there. Java is just best suited for enterprise, and that's why I teach Java, because there's a lot of job opportunities in the world of Java. Okay, again, this is a great little break to talk again. I'm sorry, guys. There's a reason why I keep saying this in this video. The deadline's coming up for my bootcamp, coderscampus.com/bootcamp. If you're interested in going through a 6-month intensive training with me, where I personally take you by the hand, 10 students maximum. I only have 2 spots left as of right now. 2 more spots are available for students to join. We go through 6 months, tons of learning, tons of pain, tons of questions, tons of frustration and, well, not yet tears, but possibly tears, to get you out the other end to be an employable programmer. That's the point of the boot camp. And the reason why I teach Java is because that's the jobs. There's a lot of job availability globally with respect to the Java language, because Java is typically used by large companies that are large because they are successful. They're successful because they're making a lot of sales and making a lot of revenue. And if they have a lot of revenue and they're growing and they're large companies, that means they have more money to reinvest back into themselves and hire programmers to help them build out their applications to become even more successful. So that's why there tends to be a lot of Java jobs available, is because it tends to be enterprise level. Large companies use it, and therefore they have the revenue to hire programmers. Okay? That's why you don't see a lot of like R programming jobs, or Elixir, or I don't know, pick any niche, programming language. You don't see a lot of those because those companies tend to be startups. They don't tend to, a lot of startups fail. So anyway, great question. Can you use it with Spring? Absolutely. There's no reason there's no reason not to, other than if you're not enterprise level, if you're just doing a little application, it just might be overkill. Okay. So, I was going to drink my coffee. So good. Okay. Where did we leave off? We call add new item. It does a post. And right, we're talking about promises. So here's where we say .then. I call this response.json. I'll explain very briefly what this means. It means take the response that I get back from the server and turn the body of that response. Same thing, you can have a body for a request. You can have a body for a response. Take the body of the response, which is a JSON object notation, because I said so. I said right here, application JSON. So the server will respond with JSON. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but yeah, it will respond with JSON. So I'm saying, hey, take the response and translate it into from a string into an actual object, an actual JavaScript object. So take the JavaScript object notation and string and turn it into an actual JavaScript object. That's what we do with this .then. And then what this does, response.json, also returns a promise. So just like the fetch returned a promise, we don't know how long this operation is going to take. We don't know how long it's going to take for it to convert the string into an actual object that we can use in code. So we have to do a .then. And then here it will return something. We can call this whatever we want, just like we can call this whatever we want. We call it response because it kind of is a response. You can call this data if you want to be generic and have it do something with the data. Like we can log it to the console and say log this data to the console. You could be more specific and say, don't call this data, call this, a to do item. Okay, that's another potential thing that you can do. I just hit save there and it reformatted my code. That's why the code jumped around. That's probably I usually just put the word data there because I'm used to it, but I'll be more explicit for you guys. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to log it to the console. That's what we're going to do just so we can take a look at this and see what's up. So I'm going to hit F12 to open up my console, and here it is. And you can see, hey, I've loaded up and all this stuff. Can I make this a little bit bigger? Yeah. And let me clear the console. So now when I say add new item, let's cross our fingers that this actually works. Ooh, I might need to reboot my server. Hold on, I don't think I rebooted. Reboot. I didn't even save my controller code. Good thing I did that, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. Rebooting, done. Okay, so let's click add new item and cross our fingers and hope that this works. Boom, add new item, look at that. So cool. So we have, well, ID, I don't think it should have been 0. I think it should have been 1, but let's click it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what's happening here is as I click add new item, it's going to the server side. It is doing all the code that we just wrote. It's hitting the controller is executing the service to create a new item. The service is instantiating a new to-do item. It's setting it to be the default of is done to be false, which is why we see the word is done false in all these places, because we're setting it to false. Then we're doing the save, which is adding it to the list of to-do items and setting an ID. The ID is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's why we see it incrementing. And it's returning that data back to the front end. So, beautiful. You can add dev tools. Yes, you can. So regarding the automatic rebooting of my Java server, there is something called dev tools. Let me Google that very quickly because I think it's very simple. It's something that you add to your POM file. Spring dev tools. There is, I think it's a simple, yeah, right here. It's a simple dependency that we add to our POM file. I don't want to get into what a POM file is, but let me go into it real quick. And in my dependencies section, I will copy paste Control-Shift-F to format my code and add Spring Boot dev tools and hit save. It's building my code, it's building, it's downloading, it might build again, I don't know. I'll hit stop, and then I will restart the server manually on my own just this time. And now when I make a change to my code, let's say I, add some sort of a system out here or something, testing, and say save, saving my Java code, it should reboot my server. There you go, I just rebooted my server. Okay, it happened so quick. So now so it's a nice little add-on to your Java project. It just automatically reboots the server for you. So good suggestion. Thank you for suggesting that. Cool. So let's get back here. So we have our tasks being added. Now on the front end though, nothing's happening. There's still just task number 1 in our list here. So what's up with that? The reason why that's not changing is because all we did was do a console.log. We need to now update the state of our front-end code. We need to update the state of our React code. React, the name, it means something. React as a language will react when the state changes in your code base. The state in this case is right here. To-do items is our state. We are not modifying the state here of our to-do items, right? To-do items is our getter method essentially that represents the list or the array of to-do items on our front end. So we need to also, although we've updated state on the back end, we need to update the state on the front end. How do we do that? we need to set to do items, right? Set to do items means we're modifying, mutating the actual state of our to do item list. I keep saying list. It's a list in the backend. It's a list in Java. It's an array in JavaScript. Um, I know it's a bit pedantic, but anyway, okay. So we want to update the state of our to do items. How do we do that? How do we take our existing list and add one to it? Do we say to do items? To do items is an array, so we do a dot push, and we push a to do item onto that array, and then we say set to do items with to do items. You might think that this is the way to go. This is not the way to go, at least as far as I know with my experience with React. This is not the way to go, and I'll explain why. But let me see if I'm let me see if I'm correct. So when I say add new item, nothing's happening, right? It's not even, is it? How come the log isn't even? Why is the log not even going? Is it doing network calls? Yeah, it's doing a fetch, and it looks like, let me look at the, how do I see the, my view is too big. How do I, oh, here, X, oh, I just click on one, don't I? There we go. Whoops. Go back. How do I, what do I, close this? Here we go. Response. Phew. So it is returning responses. Oh, I took the log. Right. I took out the console log. That's what happened. Sorry, guys. I took out the console log that that printed out a to-do item. So when okay, yeah, now it works because there's a reason why that just worked there. It doesn't work when I click on add to-do item. Nothing happens on the front end, and the reason for that is as follows. When I do when I say set to-do items. And so when I mutate this guy, the to-do items, and mutate it by pushing a new item into the to-do items, and then set it onto the existing, using the setter method, this object itself, the to-do items object, doesn't actually change. Okay? You can think about in your knowledge with respect to the Java language. If you think about a Java object, and you wanted to actually change the quote unquote pointer, to that object. Like let's say you have to do items as a Java object, and you just said .set ID to be something else, and then you looked at that to do item, to do item object in the world of Java. The actual to do item object doesn't change. Okay, it doesn't actually change the object, doesn't mutate the object. You'd have to say to do item equals new to do item, something like this. Then that would be a brand new object. It would change the actual object. It's a different memory location. That actually does update the actual fundamental underlying object. Okay. Just saying set setting the properties doesn't change the underlying object. Just like this is an array, and when we push a new item onto the array, it doesn't change the fundamental underlying object itself. So therefore, React doesn't react to the change. Okay, that's not how React works. React will only react to a change and update the view if it sees an actual change in the object, in the fundamental underlying object itself. So although the approach here feels right, and it is right, sort of, because when I refresh the screen, then you see all these new tasks, right? It's not formatted well. We'll get to the formatting. But when we refresh the screen, then it fetches to the database, and then React is able to see, oh, there's a change to the object because we fetched it from the database, blah, blah, blah. And it's able to react accordingly. So we need to force React to actually react to this change. In other words, we actually need to change the underlying to-do items object. So how do we do that? There's a notation that you can use called, what is this, object destructuring. So object destructuring takes the existing object you have and sort of turns it into a brand new object with the same setup. It's kind of like duplicating an object. Also, I say duplicating an object loosely because it's not a deep copy. If you understand Java, the difference between a shallow copy and a deep copy. I don't believe this is a deep copy, but that's okay. We don't need to worry about a deep copy right now. In other words, copying the properties of properties of properties. We don't need to worry about that. So you can use this object destructuring concept, and then we can add another item to it. Now, can I just say a to-do item? I forget now. It's been a while since I've done this, but let me get rid of the push, and let me do that and see if that works. So we take our existing our existing array of objects inside of this array, destructure it, and add an additional object to that array. Let's see if this works. So if I say add, no, that's an error. So that's because there's a different way to do this. It's not object destructuring I should be using. This is an array. We need to use array destructuring, like so. Sorry. Same concept. Object destructuring is where you have a single object and you're destructuring the properties of that object, the individual properties of that object into a new, essentially, object. Array destructuring is the same concept, although you're not doing it on the individual object, you're doing it on the array items, on the objects inside of that array. So you're destructuring the array into a new array, and then you're adding a new object onto that array like this. So add new item, boom, task number 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So now see the state is updating on the screen in tandem with the backend. So everything's in sync now. So there's that little nuance that you have to do with respect to React. And there's different ways to approach this problem. This is one way to do it. This is the way that I see a lot of people do it, and it sort of makes sense to do it this way. Another way is if you add an item to the backing array list, then you can return the entire list back to the front end. That's another way to do it. So instead of saying when we create an object over here, so when we say create new item, and we return the single to-do item, the other way to do it is to fetch the entire list of items and return the entire list of to-do items here. That way you don't need to worry about this modifying you just push a whole new, or replace it with a whole new object, right? So that's another way to do it, but there you have it. We can also update the state by using set state. So good question. A lot of people are used to the concept of doing, instead of saying set to do items, a lot of people are used to the concept of this dot set state, and they will do the same thing, dot 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 to do items, comma a to do item, right? This is a very common thing that you'll see in terms of examples on the internet. This is pre-React version 16, I think. Again, I'm fairly new to React, but because I'm new to React, I'm able to just learn the most latest and greatest up-to-date React code. And from what I'm seeing, the most latest and greatest updated React code is to use hooks. Instead of modifying the state like this, you modify the state like this, using the use state hook. These hooks there's a bunch of different hooks that you can use. These hooks are new additions to the React library that you can leverage. And what that does is allows you to use functional components. So this app is a functional component, not a whatever the stateful component, or whatever the opposite of a functional component is. So it allows you to use functional components, which, from what I've read, my brief research, functional components are easier to test, is what I've heard. Again, don't shoot the messenger. This is just what I've read. So I said, okay, fine. I'll favor functional components over whatever the opposite is, stateful components. My terminology is iffy, but yes, can you use set state? Yes, but in this component, this functional component, no, you cannot use this dot set state. You need to use the hook. If you were using a non-functional component, maybe that's the word I'll use, then you need to use the this dot set state. What you will notice is in my functional component that I have here, there is no this keyword anywhere, because the concept of this doesn't exist in a functional component. Okay, hopefully that helps answer your question. Got it, thank you, cool. So we have a way to add items. Now, this looks terrible. So how do we update the look and the feel here? Good question if you're asking that. So these guys need to have, essentially, they need to be in their own div. So the to do, when I say to do items is what we were modifying here, the set to do items and adding a new to do item. This is the underlying getter method that we're using to the variable that's holding the array that holds all these items, and we're saying return to do item blah. So what we could do is well, let's take a look at the actual to do item component. So the actual to do item component, if I control click on it, how come I can't control click on it? It should just go here. This to do item component, which again is also a functional component, just returns an input, right? It returns an input with a span. So that makes sense why we're seeing what we're seeing, because there's no block elements here in terms of HTML. So it could return a div, and actually it probably should return a div instead of using these empty tags, which is the React fragment. You could just say, hey, return a div. Div is a block level element, so when I say save, it'll turn these into block level elements, right? So then I have a really long to-do list here. So that works. That's a fairly quick fix to make it look nicer. The next step is I want to be able to modify the name of the task, right? Because this doesn't help me from a, fundamentally speaking, from a, a to-do list concept. I want to be able to modify the name of the task. So how do I do that? Well, look, the name of the task is right here inside of my to-do item component. This represents a single to-do item. It's just a span. A span tag is not helpful. It's not, well, it could be helpful, but it's not helpful in this case. It's not an actual input name type, right? Input type name? Why am I thinking, anyway, geez. I think so. Anyway, span, this is bad. I'm having what some refer to as a brain fart. So there is a difference here, or there is a complexity here that I want to do depending on whether or not this task is complete. If the task is complete, we don't care about changing the name of the task. We just want it to be like striked out or something, or struck out. So what we can do is we can add, well, first let's change this span to be an input. Type equals text. There we go. Type equals name. Ugh, there's the brain fart gone. So type equals text, and the value will be equal to this. Like so. Oh my goodness, what just happened? Let me undo. So the value, okay, let's reboot. Value equals something. You pass in an object. What is the object that you want the value to be? You want it to be the to-do item.task. To-do item.task represents the name of the task, which we'll cut out and paste here. And input is a self-closing tag, so you need to make it a self-closing tag. So let's save this, go back to our view, and now we see all the tasks have names, or text boxes that we can modify. But if I change this task to be get groceries, well, I can't do anything. If I try to type or hit backspace or anything like that, it's not letting me. So this is where we need to implement some code that is sort of native to React, which is on change. So when we try to change the value in here, the value, remember, the value is task. So it's just displaying the value of to-do-item.task. But when I type something in right here, we're not actually updating the value. We're not actually updating the underlying object that has the task property. We're not updating to-do-item.task. So when we actually change, when we try to change the text box, we need to tell it to update the value of the task. Okay? So in other words, on change, we can pass in, well, normally we can do a couple things. We could pass in a function, so we can say, update task as a function, and then we can declare a function up here that says function update task, right? And that function can say, set, what is it? What is our state? Our state is here. So we can update the to-do item. We can say set to-do item, and here we are doing, which language is this? This is, someone's asking a question, what language? This is React. So in order to update the state of a property of the to-do item, we use object destructuring, right? So this is how we would do it. We would say to-do item dot dot dot. So we would destructure the individual object called to-do item, and we would modify the value here, which is task. So we would say, hey, set the task equal to something, right? What is it that we want to set it to? Well, we don't know yet. I haven't told you. But look, input type text value equals this task. On change, call the update task function, which what does that do? The update task function, when we change this input, sets the task's value to something. So what does that look like on the front end? If I hit backspace, it changes it to something. If I continue to type like crazy and hit spacebar and back, nothing is changing, but it does set it to something. So we know that when it changes, we are modifying the value. Sorry, where am I? When it changes, when the text box changes, because on change equals update task, we're modifying the value of task to be something, which is right here, where the text box is tied to, is bound to the to-do item.task property. So obviously we don't want to set it to something, because that doesn't make sense. We want to set it to what was just sent as the actual state of the text box, right? And that is where we pass in the event. So we can pass in the event. And the event, which comes from HTML, event dot, oh, what is it? Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. This is frustrating because I do this all the time. E dot, oh, I can't believe I need to Google this. React input on change event. Oh, Trevor, I should know this. So handle change, where target.value. Ugh. So e.target.value. Okay. Now there's a better way to do this, sort of, in my opinion, but anyway. So that's all we need to do. So now let's refresh. So task is still 0. So now if I hit backspace, it actually updates it as I would expect. Backspace, 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 backspace. Get groceries. So I can actually now start typing into this text box, which you would think is like, okay, what's the big deal? Like, you congratulations, you can type into a text box. But what's actually happening here is a bit interesting. We're not just typing text into a text box. We've bound our text box to the to-do item.task property. So the task property is being updated, and I can show you that in a console log. I can say console log to-do item.task. So we can actually take a peek at the to-do item.task. So when I open up my console here, I can hit backspace, and we can see the value of groceries, or the value of the task, changing as I type this in, typing stuff in, right? It's actually updating the text box, or the actual underlying value of the task. So, and there's a reason why there's a delay here. So when I type typing stuff and have two F's, all we see is a single F. There's a reason why we see a single F in the console and two F's up here. It's slightly complex. Set to do item. Again, it's kind of like an asynchronous method. It will go and set asynchronously, whenever it can do the task, it'll update the to do item, and then we're immediately saying console.log. So we're getting an out of date representation of this object. So the better way to do it would be inside of a use effect hook. Anyway, so oh wait, hold on, is dirty fetch. Okay, so how do I? Okay, let me do a use effect just to show you what I mean by the view here of doing console.log. Let me have a use effect hook that does a console.log to do item, and we'll say, hey, when the to do item state changes, log it to the console. Okay, so instead of doing console.log right in the update task, we'll do it when it changes, which again, React reacts and updates the screen and the state when it notices a change. Okay, so this is a better way to do it. So if I say task 0 and hit delete, now it says task number, right? Delete, delete, delete. Now when I say get groceries. Now you see that it's in line with what I've actually typed into the text box. There's a difference between putting a console.log here saying to do item.task versus putting it here. So if I put them both, watch, I have it in two spots now. If I hit delete, you see they're out of sync. So I can actually say, let me put some more log in here and say, from function to do item, and then I can say from use effect hook to do item.task, just so we can have some context. So if I add the word s to get groceries, look, from the function get grocery, it's missing the s because it wasn't done updating and rendering the view, right? It hadn't done reacting to the change that I just made because it calls the set to do item to update the underlying to do item. It wasn't done yet, and I went to the console log and I did the log. This hurts your brain because this is asynchronous coding. This is how JavaScript works. Asynchronous coding, you can see it in multi-threaded coding in the world of Java. Multi-threading is asynchronous. It breaks your brain. It's hard to understand, which is why I'm trying to show you the difference between, waiting for the value to update and getting the correct value once it has updated versus just not waiting, right? So, okay. So the better way to do it is a console log here, but we don't need to do this use effect console log. This is just noise. So let me remove it. Let me remove this. Now we can finish things off here by saying, hey, we have a use effect hook already that will update my to-do item if it notices that the to-do item is dirty. In other words, if a change has been made to it. So look, we can actually leverage existing code that's going to update the to-do item data because we're stringifying. Oh, here we go. Here's an example of the body in stringification. I've done that in the last episode. I showed you how to send a request body. This is how you send a request body. You stringify the to-do item object itself. So it takes the object, turns it into a JSON string, and then sends the JSON string to the server side, which is how the server side wants to receive data. It doesn't want an object. It wants a string representation of that object, which is why we use JSON.stringify. So what we can do here is we can leverage this existing code by doing this. Set dirty to true. Kind of. Hopefully. Remember that set dirty is the same asynchronous call as set to do item. So you're kind of hoping that set dirty will work. It should. I think that should finish before, but it might not always finish. Is there a way to guarantee that it always finishes first? Let me think. I mean, it should, but that is a little bit sketchy in terms of its. I think this is what I use in production, so I think this should work. So what's going to happen here is, let me refresh the page. Let me change task number 0 to hit backspace. Now, when I hit backspace, it should have sent a request, a fetch, to the backend with a put, and it should have modified the state inside of the actual server side array list. So if I hit refresh, yeah, see, it doesn't say task number 0 anymore. In other words, I've persisted the state, right? Get groceries. Refresh, it still says get groceries. I could close down this tab and go back to it, and it still says get groceries. So I've actually leveraged existing code that we had written in the last in the last tutorial to also update the value of the groceries. So I can hit the checkbox and refresh, and the checkbox works as well as the name of the task. So this is great. I actually didn't have to do all that code. That's fantastic. I've already done it. So now what's left? Well, now we want to actually have the state of the checkbox do something. We want it to modify the view. What do we want to have happen when we check the checkbox? Well, ideally, you want to cross out your task because it's done. So how can we do that? Well, again, we can react to the change of the state for the to-do item. In other words, it should it should re-render the screen when we change the value of the checkbox, because it'll go in. We set, when we check the checkbox, we set dirty to true, and then we set the to-do item. Oh, right, I forgot to say, you can do it this way or you can do it this way. So this is an inline version. I keep pointing at my screen like you can look at me, or like you can see what I'm pointing at. You can, on change, you can do it inline like this, or on change, you can call a function like that and have the function code be elsewhere. This, in my opinion, is slightly less typing. It's in my mind it's slightly cleaner, but I don't know if there's a convention of choosing one versus the other. But hey, at least this example, I'll leave it like this. Normally you would choose one or the other. You wouldn't do it both ways. But here's an example of how you would do it both ways, just for educational purposes. So again, this is not what I would do in my production code, but you can see both variations because there is a difference, right? On change here, we're passing in the arrow function concept, right? Versus on change here, we're not doing an arrow function. We're actually just passing it the actual function itself, which again, both of them do the same thing. This, you're defining a function and putting the entire function in there. It would be kind of like the same way of doing this. It's kind of the same thing, right? Function update task E, blah, blah, blah. You're embedding the entire function statement declaration in here. It's just, there's another way to write this code out, right? You can use arrow function. How do you use an arrow function? You get rid of the name function. You get rid of the name of the function. You leave the method signature. You use the arrow syntax, and now you're done, right? That's how you convert between them. So I can also do this, and it will work as well. So I can say task number, 19,000 or whatever, and refresh, and it works, right? It's updating, refresh, it's there. So two ways to do the same thing, but hey, I will revert my code back to having the function be extracted out. Okay. Back to what I was saying before, which is when we check the checkbox, what do we want to have happen? Well, we want to change the view. We want to change this input type text to be something different. We don't want it to be an input box anymore. We want it to revert back to a span. So what we can do is we can add this sneaky little ternary operator. So we add our object brackets here because we want to do a bit of code. Now, note, you can't write an if statement here, which is kind of annoying. I would like to be able to write code in here, but I get it. This is a return statement. We're returning a view. So that's just the way it works. I'd love to be able to say if, to do item dot, is done equals true, then I want to return a span with the to do item dot task inside of it. Else, this is what I would like to do. You can't do this. Okay, it doesn't let you do this. You can't have an if here it says unexpected token. So how can you have an if statement in your code? Well, this is where you do ternary operators. A ternary operator, so let me move the input type text up into this else block. So this code here is invalid, but it serves a good purpose of showing you how a ternary operator works. So we can use to do item dot is done. Okay, so just instead of saying if to do item is done, we just say to do item is done. Question mark is the ternary operator, and we can say, if it's true, do this. If it's false, do that. That's how this works. Return true, return false, right? With the colon is the syntax that separates the two. So if is done is true, in other words, here, I'm going to cut the span out, and I'm going to paste it into the true. So if it's done, if to do item is done, I want to return a span. Otherwise, else, I want to return an input type equals text. So now we can get rid of this if statement block and save our code. And it's going to reformat my code. Oh, it didn't reformat my code because I did something wrong. What did I do wrong? Failed to compile, unexpected token, expected whatever on. So to do item is done? Question mark. Return a span. Otherwise, there. I think it was I put this semicolon in there. It didn't like the semicolon there because what it does is it wraps everything with round brackets. So as soon as I remove the semicolon and hit save, you see what it does. It added the round brackets around the span and round brackets around the input type. So that's how you do that. That's how you have it work in a slightly dynamic way. So now when I go back, look, my get groceries is no longer an input box. It's just a span. It's a label. If I uncheck it, it changes back to an editable text box. Check, 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 check. Cool, right? So it's reacting and updating the view accordingly. And I can refresh the screen and it maintains this state because we've already put all the code in to maintain the state. So now one last thing I want to do for the span, I want to add style. In order to add style, you don't just pass in a single, just the object. You pass in an object that represents the style. So just like here, I'm passing in, how I pass in an object value is this. I have the single curly bracket here, and I'm passing in a property. With style, style doesn't want a single property, it wants an object. So how do you pass in an object? Well, you write the object brackets again. This can be confusing to people because you see double brackets and you're like, wait, what's going on? Well, the inner brackets represents an object. You're actually writing out the object in its object form. So that's all that's doing. So the style that we're passing in is going to be, I think it's called text decoration, is I forget how do you, is it text decoration? Is like line through or something? I don't remember. Oh, sweet, it is. There we go. So text decoration line throughs as style. So we're just doing inline style, which is not the sexiest way to do it, but it works. Oh my God, I keep forgetting I have coffee. It might be. I actually have a coffee warmer, thanks to a student of mine from one of my boot camps. Thank you, Bruno, for suggesting a coffee little heating pad for my coffee. It's a waste of electricity, but it keeps my coffee hot when I'm doing these live streams. So, yeah, there we go. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So now we can do the same concept for removing an item from the list. What time is it? I've been doing this for an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do a lot less teaching now because I want to get done. I want to be done with this assignment. So, how do we remove an item? Well, let's have a little garbage bin. Let me go to my trusty Emojipedia. Let me search for a trash bin. Here's a waste basket. Oh, there we go. Waste basket emoji. Let me copy the waste basket emoji. And I'm just going to add here, after the to-do item, I'll add another, I guess another span. We'll add style. We'll add a little bit of margin to it. Margin left. Just to, let me not add the margin left and let me show you what it's going to look like. If I just paste in the garbage bin here and go back to the React app, the garbage bins are kind of close to the tasks. So I want to add just a little bit of space between them. So I can say style margin left and add, I don't know, 2 rem, just to add a little bit there. Obviously, it'd be nicer if they were all in one row. But anyway, whatever. Also, the cursor, I want it to be a pointer. Oops, not pointer. What that does is when I hover over it, it turns into a little hand icon. And then when I click on it, I want it to delete the item. So in other words, I want to have onClick. We've seen this before. OnClick, we pass it in a function. The function can be called anything. We'll call it delete to-do item. We can declare the function up here if we like. Function delete, what do they call it? Delete to-do item. Right? And how do we delete a to-do item? Well, same thing. We do a fetch. I'm going to copy paste the fetch. Instead of doing a put, we're going to do a delete. And with a put or a delete, we don't have to pass any body. I'm going quick here, but I'm doing it on purpose. All it needs to know is if I'm deleting something, what is the ID of the item that you want me to delete? Okay? And then once it's deleted, we want to... how do we do this? Once it's deleted inside of the individual to-do item, I guess that's not where we want it to happen. Right. Because the what we want to have happen is when we delete a to-do item, we want to remove that item from the underlying list array list. Let me just say array list. We want to remove it from the array, which is actually in the parent. The parent object, which is the app.js, is what actually holds on to the entire array. So that's the one that we need to update. So this is actually cool. This is a neat little thing that we need to do. We need to propagate an event up into our parent object. Because again, app.js is the parent object. App.js, I keep pointing at the screen with my finger. App.js defines the child component or components, which is to-do item. So what we can do is we want the app.js to have the function called, handle delete to do item, right? And maybe we pass it the actual item that we want to remove from the list. So if we pretend that app.js has this function, then cool. Then we can let's for now pretend like we have this and it works, right? So how do we delete this item from the backing array list? No, array. JavaScript array. No such thing as an array list in JavaScript. How do we remove this item from the list? There's a bunch of different ways to do it. The way I will do it is, and again, remember when we remove the item from an array, we also need to make sure that we change the actual array object so that React can react to it and display the change immediately on the screen. In other words, we need to do this kind of concept that we did above. We need to mutate not just mutate the object, we need to completely change it to a new array. So how do we do this? Usually I think it's splice. I think we usually say, to do items dot splice. And I forget, let me just do a quick JavaScript array splice. Oh yeah, splice, we need to know the index and how many to delete, and then the items to be added if we want to add any items. So the index, we need to know what index to delete at. So in other words, we need to find the index, which is annoying because how do you find an index again? JavaScript array find index of item. We need to use like a filter or something. There's a find index method, right? Array.findIndex. Okay. Is it the actual array? So we say to do items dot find index. Is that how you do it, or is it the array? Yeah, ages is in this case it's a variable. Okay. So we need to say find index of something, right? So find index of. How do they do it? Check adult. What is check adult? Check adult is the age. Okay, let me get back to that. This is how I usually do it. I say to do items dot filter. So I filter my array. I filter by to do item. I'll say a to do item. So we're doing a function here. The function is a to do item.id equals item.id. Okay, so basically this is going to find us the actual item in the backing array. And there's a way to do the Visual Studio Code. Oh, sorry, dude, I didn't see your question. Yes, it's Visual Studio Code. I like it for the purposes of React. You'll see a lot of people using it. So filter. I'm sorry, guys. I should know this off the top of my head, but I haven't done this enough. This is a very common thing to do. How do you remove something from an array list and make it work inside of a React context? So why don't I could Google that. React remove item from array. How to delete an item from an array in React. Because the complexity here with React is you don't just remove an item, you also need to fundamentally update the backing object so that React can react to the update of that array. Let me see. Do they have a nice... Come on, guys. Show me... Okay, here we go. Props on delete. So do we have the on delete somewhere? Have we defined it? On click, on delete, show me the on delete. Handle increment, this.props.on delete, this.props. Did I miss it? Handle delete. Here we go. Jeez. So this.state.items.filter. Oh, okay, right, of course. So here's what they do. This makes total sense now. So here's what they do. In order to delete the item, they actually don't use splice, and they actually don't use find index. They use a neat method. They filter the whole list. They take the whole list of items, and they filter it such that the item that you want to remove is not equal to the items in all of the list or all of the array. So in other words, filter will maintain. Hopefully you know how filter works. I don't think I have time to explain how filter works, but essentially this will remove that item from the backing list and return it to this to do items. So what we can say is const updated array or updated to do items equals. Okay, so we have this updated to do items, and then what we can say is we can say set to do items to be the array destructured version of the updated to do items. Okay, so this right here, the array destructuring concept, is what is unique to React. Okay, because if we just did this filtering, then we'd be good, right? We've changed the to do items. We've got this, and you would think that you could just do this, just say set the to do items to be updated to do items. But we need to remember we need to actually fundamentally change the state, fundamentally change the underlying object in order to have the state react appropriately. Okay, so that should do it for us. But here's the curveball. The curveball is I just saved my code there, and when I saved it, it formatted it. That's why the code changed. It's just a different formatting of the code. So the thing that we're talking about here is how do we actually execute this method? Because remember, we have the garbage bin over here, the trash bin. The trash bin is on the child component, the child to do items. So how do we do this? Well, we pass in this function, this handle delete to do item. We pass it into the entire to do item component as a parameter. So we can use the word emit. Emit delete to do item. That will be the name of the property that we're setting inside of the child component. We're going to set it equal to the handle delete to do item. So there's a different naming convention here so that you can sort of understand what's up. The child component has the emit function. The parent function or parent component has the handle function. Child emits, the parent handles. So what I just saved and it reformatted my code. That's why the code changed. So emit delete to do item is the name of the property, in other words, the name of the function that I want to define inside of to do item. So to do item, up at the top, we can say it will be passed in as part of the props. So we can do object destructuring again on the props. We can object destructure sort of. I don't know. Actually, is this called object destructuring? I don't know if this is the same concept. But we can grab the emit delete to do item property from the props that are being passed in like this. So now this emit delete to do item will have a reference to and will be the actual handle delete to do item function that we defined here in the parent. Okay, so this is just a function that we pass from the parent to the child. It's just a function. It's the actual thing. So what we want to do is when we click on this trash can, we want to say on click, don't delete to do item, but instead emit the delete to do item. Okay, sort of, but remember, emit delete to do item refers to handle delete to do item, and handle delete to do item takes a parameter as the input. It has to know what item I'm deleting, right? What item is it that I want to delete? So how do we do that? Well, we need to, instead of just saying the function, we need to define with our, our our brackets here, our arrow function, we need to tell it what item to remove. What item do we want to remove? We want to remove the to-do item, which is the state of the object that we're working with for this specific to-do item. Okay, this to-do item will have an ID and so on and so forth. So yeah, this delete to-do item that we were, oh, hold on, sorry, my bad. Undo. Close. We want to call emit, but somewhere else. On click, we don't want to emit. We want to first actually remove it from the database. So we can remove it from the database here, which makes sense. And then once we've removed it from the database, then we can emit. We can say emit delete to-do item, and it could be to-do item that we're emitting. Okay? And then to-do item over here needs to be called when we click here. So again, when we click on the trash bin, we invoke the to-do item, delete to-do item function here, which actually hits the server side and actually does the code to delete it from the server side. And then we emit to tell the front end to update itself. Okay, so let's see if this works. Let's go back to our React app, refresh. So if I say delete this task, 1983, I clicked on it and nothing happened. There was a failure. Access. Do I not? Maybe I didn't define it. That's the problem. I forgot to define it on the server side. So now let's switch our brains to server side. Server side does not have a delete mapping. So remember with this conversation that we had over here, oh geez, it reformatted my code. Oh man. Create, read, equals get, or this update is a put like this, delete is like this. What a pain. There. And then crud, I think this was like my underlining. Yeah. Why did it when I hit save, is it reformatted on save? That's the issue. I forget how to turn off the there's some like at format, anyway, whatever. When I save it, this is gonna go bye-bye. But delete, we haven't done this yet. We haven't specified a delete endpoint. We have a get endpoint. We have a post, which is a create equals post. Read is get. Updating an existing element is put. We have a put mapping. We do not yet have a delete mapping. So let's define a delete mapping, which is exactly what our front end is doing. Our front end is doing a fetch, a delete method fetch, in other words, a delete call, a delete request, to the API / to-do item / the ID of that to-do item endpoint. So delete mapping is /API / to-do items / the ID of the item that you want to delete. So it's very similar to this one. I'll copy paste it, but instead of update to-do item is delete to-do item. And the path variable we need, but there is no request body. Remember, we didn't actually send a body. There is no body in the fetch. The put, this is the put method right here. The put method defined a body. So in the put, we need to have a request body specified on our server side. But with the delete on the front end, the delete does not specify a body. We do not have body set equal to JSON.stringify. You know what I mean? There is no body here. So that means we don't need to have a request body on the delete. This is the delete mapping, delete mapping method. So how do we delete? Well, we need to call the service. The service is what? The service will be to-do service dot delete to-do item, and we pass in the delete, or the ID that we want to delete. And then actually, I don't think we really need to return any data. We can just return a message that says okay or something like that, because we don't need to return anything specifically. But the delete to-do item service method doesn't exist, so we need to create it. Let's go ahead and hover over and say create it. How do we delete an item? Do we need to do anything special here in terms of the service layer? I don't think so. I think it happens all on the repository. So we'll just say to do repository.delete. We pass the ID that we want to delete. Hover over this and create it. And again, normally this is where the database would handle this for us, but since we don't have a formal database, we need to handle the complexity here. So essentially what we can do is we can say to do item items dot shoot. How do we delete? So we need to do a stream. So this is Java. This is kind of annoying, but we need to stream, and we need to do what? Let me think. Do we find it and then do a dot remove? Oh my God, Trevor. Okay, removing from an array list. We want to do this, to do items dot remove, and we want to know the index of the thing to remove, right? So is there a way that I can do it just like I did it in JavaScript land? I might be able to say to do, I've never done it like this, but let me do a stream and a filter. We'll do it the same way we did it on the front end and see if it works. I've never tried this on the back end, but maybe this is how you can do it. So we can say to do item, so to do item dot get ID dot dot equals ID, and we say not equal to that ID, right? How come it's upset with me? Oh, it's just so dot filter dot collect. So we'll collect it back into, I guess, a list. Collectors dot to list. And we'll set that back to be the underlying to do item. So to do items equals that stream. Oh, it doesn't maintain my, that's annoying. That's a setting in my, anyway. So we'll just do that and set them back into to-do items. So we'll mutate the actual object itself. That should do it. That should technically delete it from the server side. And then, there's not much more we need to do except for import our delete mapping annotation here. So I'll save everything, and it will restart my server. So now let's see if this works. So if I click delete on task number 2, oh, unexpected token. Oh, what was the issue? Let me refresh. Oh, it rebooted the server. Right. Okay. So I think the IDs were messed up there. So if I add some tasks and delete task 1, refresh. Okay. If I hit delete here and then refresh. Okay. So there's a disconnect between the front end and the back end. So the back end's working. It is indeed removing the item, but the front end is not reacting to this properly. Oh, did I not save? Let me save. Delete. No, I hit delete, refresh. Now task 5 is gone. So it's working on the back end, but the front end is not kicking into gear. So it looks like this this code is potentially not working properly. Let's do a log here and say updated to-do items. Because do we have maybe it's because we don't have a use effect hook here. I thought we would have though. To do items. Yeah, no, we do. And it should, when we modify to do items here, it should modify this. Yeah, that should work. Okay. So let's see what's up. Did I save? Yes, I saved. Let's go to the console and see what's up. When I click delete task 4, oh, well, there's an error. That's uncaught in promise to do item 31. Fetch. Oh, so the return value from the response here, response entity okay is not working properly. Um, why is that? Where is, so what it's complaining about is in the to-do item itself, in the delete, here somewhere it's not happy. It's not happy about the response. So here's where we can, yeah, sure. Let's do a bit of debugging here. We can say log in here, and we can log the response object. So hopefully you see what I've done here. We call the delete endpoint, and then when we get a response back from the server, we can do a log on the response to see what the exact response is from the server. Helpful to know that that exists. So when I hit delete, we can see the response. So the response is, so the status is 200, which is great. The body, we can't see it, but the body was, it was just the word okay, so it shouldn't break anything, right? Because we don't even worry about the response. This is the actual body of the response. We don't even use it. We just say emit, delete, to do item. And then when we say emit, delete, to do item, I see updated to do items is 2, which makes sense. So emit updated to do item goes into, it should do this one and say updated to do items, which is 2, and set that, cool. And then it says, hey, I've loaded up, and then we have a syntax error. Interesting. We have a syntax error after it says, hey, I've loaded up. Hey, I've loaded up, if not to do items. I'm assuming it won't refetch. Let me do a log here and say fetching list of to-do items. So yeah, it says, hey, I've loaded up. Yeah. So why is it saying there's a syntax error? Anyone else on the, anyone in the chat see the problem? Hey, I've loaded up. Unexpected. Like these are all 200 responses. Oh, we're so close. Why would, I mean, it looks like it's working, right? I can say delete 11, and 11 does indeed go away. 12, 11, 10, whatever, new, 6. So 7, 13, 14, if I refresh, 7, like it does, looks good. Why? Set to do items, handle to do updated is this. Set them to be that. That will re-trigger that. It'll go into to do. Uncaught in promise, syntax error, unexpected token. Oh, so it's in the promise. I'm wondering if it is this. I'm wondering if the response JSON is not working properly because I'm passing in, because the body is something, it's just a string. That's probably, yeah, that's got to be it, right? I don't know. So when I'm saying response entity.ok and I'm passing in okay, I think that's a problem. What if I pass it? What if I say don't even worry about it? Because I technically don't need to do the response.json here. I technically don't even care about the response. I can just do the emit up here and don't even do response.json and then don't even need this dot then. Let's see if that gets rid of that error. So if I say delete task 17, there you go. Yeah, so it was an issue with I was trying to take the response body, which was just a simple string called OK, and I was trying to turn this into, I assumed it was a JSON string, and I was trying to turn it into an actual object, a JavaScript object, and this is not a JavaScript object. I'd have to like use, this, and I'd have to say that this OK is a string, and then anyway. So this is just not a good, maybe if I said null, it would have been better. But yeah, there you go. What Java IDE are you using? I'm using Eclipse with dark theme. So if you go to in Eclipse, if you say help and go to Eclipse Marketplace for one of the latest versions of Eclipse, you can search once it loads up. You can search for I just look for the word dark and darkest dark theme with dev style 2027 whatever, and I just install this. So I just like the dark theme everything. So yeah, there we go. I think we're good, right? We have tasks. We're able to say we're complete the tasks. Oh, oh, come on. I thought I was done. I thought I did it. I was going to declare victory. Unexpected end of JSON input. Um, why was that an unexpected end of JSON input? I checked the checkbox. Okay. So if I delete task number 2, we're still good. If I undelete task number 3, we're still good. If I delete task number 3, we're good. If I mark task number 4 as what? What happened? Seems like it works to me. I'm going to declare victory. So, um, get groceries. I don't know. Wash the dog if you have one. Go for a walk. Uh, record live stream. Done. You get the idea, right? So, although the look and the feel of this is not the prettiest thing in the world, this is functionally and mostly from a programming coding standpoint, the code that I would almost entirely push to production and have this be a live code base, right? This code is using all of the conventions and stuff that you would hope to see in the real world. Things that it does not have is a database hookup. I probably could have added a database because I think I actually added more complexity by not having a database, which is kind of funny. That's a testament to Spring Data JPA. So maybe, well, if you love this stuff, I would suggest joining my bootcamp. Again, this is I don't know how many times I've said this. I'm sorry that I keep needing to push this. coderscampus.com/bootcamp. The only reason why I push it is because today is the last day to register for the upcoming cohort, which starts essentially next week. If you love this stuff and you love coding and you want to get a job as a coder, I guarantee you a job offer. So long as you graduate from the bootcamp, all that means is that you do the work. You do the work, you complete the assignments, you take to heart my feedback. We do personalized code reviews. We do everything we can, and we have already received students have received job offers and have accepted job offers and are now working in the real world and getting paid, a regular junior level developer salary in the real world. Even one guy got an intermediate job that's in the works right now. They canceled all the interviews for this one guy, and because they said we want to go with you. He had asked for 80,000. He's like more of an intermediate level. So even if you're an intermediate level programmer, but you want to switch to the Java language, this bootcamp could be a fit for you. Yeah, he asked for 80K. We'll see what they offer him, but they're probably going to offer him somewhere around the 80K level for him. So yeah, he went from not having a job, a Java developer job, to essentially going to be receiving an offer for a Java developer. So if your goal is to get a job, that's what I do. I teach you exactly what you need to know to get a job in this crazy pandemic world that we live in. There's a lot more opportunity as remote developers to get a job as a remote developer, which means almost the entire planet is open to you now as a potential employer. So wherever the employer is, you could get employed. There's some complexities there, and we can talk about that kind of stuff in the bootcamp. But the main thing is you'll learn how to code and learn the conventions and learn exactly what it is that these employers want you to know. Okay? There's so much you learn in university and post-secondary education systems that you will not have to know in the real world. It's so out of date that employers don't care that you know this stuff, and it actually hurts a little bit because you'll make suggestions and interview scenarios where they're going to be like, no, that's why are you using JSPs? Why are JSPs are out of date now. So anyway, that's the beauty of this bootcamp is it's up to date, cutting edge. You're going to learn exactly what you need to know in the real world. So if you love this stuff, check it out. coderscampus.com/bootcamp. You can apply to be part of this next cohort. Like I said, I have 2 more open spots, which probably are going to be filled today. So I realize if you're watching this in the future, when you go to coderscampus.com/bootcamp, you're going to be probably redirected in the future to a waiting list. So hey, I encourage you to join the waiting list if the bootcamp is full. I might do another one in 3 to 6 months, but I am expecting a baby in technically any day now, but the due date is in about 3 weeks, but it could be any day. So I am expecting a baby soon. So probably the next boot camp won't be in 3 months. Probably it'll be in 6 months. But so that'll be exciting. But yeah, if you go to apply because you're watching this video in the future and it's asking you to be part of a waitlist, just throw yourself on the waiting list. There's no harm in it. And you'll be notified when the next one's going live. So if your goal is to get a job, check it out. The boot camp. This is where I go far more in depth into these topics of exactly what you should do in a real world scenario and how you would implement this code in a production environment. How you would utilize a database. How do you use the appropriate properties? How do you externalize things like you don't want to have this. You don't want to have an HTTP localhost 8080 in your code. You want to extract that out into an external property. How do you do that? How do you make it, react to different code bases? How do you make it, pass in the appropriate URL structure for a QA environment or a dev environment or a production environment, right? Those are the types of nitty-gritty details that we get into in the boot camp. So, hopefully that is good for you. Hopefully you have learned a lot in creating this fairly simplistic to-do list application. If you don't want to join the bootcamp, but you want to support what I've just done, hey, click the like button, right? Subscribe to the channel. You've heard this everywhere with YouTube. You know it by now, but sometimes it's nice to hear a reminder. It really does help the channel. There you go. So feel free to leave any comments on this video after. If it's not live anymore, please, by all means, leave a comment. I read all the comments. I tend to reply to all of them as well at this point. Again, baby's coming, could throw everything up in the air. But I think that's it for now. I'm going to hit the stop button. Thank you so much for sticking with me for 2 hours. I have, 10 people or something that are with me right now. Thank you for waiting and watching this for this long. That's incredible. Well done on your attention span. So, if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Happy learning. Bye for now.